For tonight's Conversations with Great Minds, I'm joined by Nobel Prize winning economist Dr. Paul Krugman. Dr. Krugman received a Ph.D. from MIT and has taught at several schools, including Yale, MIT, and Stanford. He's written 20 books, including several bestsellers, and over 200 papers on international trade, finance, currencies, and several other topics. He's a recipient of numerous awards, including the Nobel Prize in Economics, which he won in 2008. Currently, he's a professor of economics and current affairs at Princeton University, and you can read his work every day as a columnist on the pages of the New York Times. Dr. Krugman's new book is titled End This Depression Now. And with Europe in crisis and the United States economy still teetering on the edge, he's someone we should all be looking to for ways to get our economy back on track. Dr. Paul Krugman joins me now from our Los Angeles studio. Welcome.
Hi there.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's great to see you here. First off, where are we at right now? Your book is called End This Depression Now. Is that where we are, a depression?
Yeah, I use the word pretty deliberately. A recession is when things are heading down. A depression is when things are down. And although, at least in the United States, we got out of a technical recession in the middle of 2009, it doesn't seem very good out there, right? I mean, we've had some growth, some job creation, but not enough to stop a really disastrous situation. About 4 million people have been out of work for more than a year. College students graduating and finding no jobs, or no jobs anyway, that make any use of their skills and give them any hope of paying off their debts. So this is a depressed economy. It's like the Great Depression. It's not as bad as the Great Depression. You know, that's great, wonderful, not as bad as the Great Depression. But it is really terrible, and we are not doing what we need to do to get out of it.
Would another way of explaining it be that it's sort of like the Great Depression would have been if FDR had been president in '29 and had responded within a few months or a year, less than a year, with stimulus rather than dragging us through 3 years of Herbert Hoover?
Well, actually, not quite. I mean, what I would say actually is that the main reason this is not as bad as the Great Depression, and by the way, give it a chance, right? You know, given what's happening in Europe, that comparison may not be quite as favorable as it looks right now. Right. But a couple of things happened. One was that the banks were not allowed to fail en masse the way they were in 1930-31. The other thing is that actually big government has been our salvation here. The fact that the Medicare checks keep going out and the Social Security checks keep going out, that unemployment benefits have provided a lifeline for a lot of people, that food stamps have provided a lifeline. Those are all things that, although conservatives hate them and they say, oh, look at all that government spending, those are actually things that have cushioned this. Without those, we probably would have had a full-on replay of the Great Depression.
Wow. How do you explain the attack on Keynes?
Well, so the book, End This Depression, talks about that a fair bit. Conservatives have always hated Keynes, not so much because they are actually convinced he's wrong. They're not actually particularly interested in whether it's right or wrong, but because there are two things that they don't like about it. One is if you admit that the government can do anything good, like fight a recession or fight a depression and create jobs, then the case for having the government do stuff is stronger, and to pay for those things, you might actually have to tax rich people. And so they don't like it because it seems to be, for them, the opening wedge for a more expansive role for government. The other thing is that conservatives, and especially business types, love the notion that what we need is for them to be confident. Business confidence is always the thing, and if you look at the way that President Obama is attacked, it's always every time he so much as hints at a bit of concern about income inequality or a bit of concern about runaway bankers, they say, oh, he's hurting business confidence by attacking the business community, and that will hurt the economy. If you say, but you know, actually the government can create jobs through Keynesian policies, then that club is no longer hanging over the head of the government. You can say, if you're worried about jobs, how about we create some instead of trying to flatter businessmen and tell them how much we love them. So between those two things, the right has always hated Keynesianism, has spent 40 or 50 years trying to tear it down, which is a real shame because right now we're in John Maynard Keynes's world.
Yeah, and wouldn't a fairly straightforward way to explain that to the average American be to simply say that one of the roles of government in a time of crisis is to be the employer of last resort? And if so, why have Democrats and progressives been so incompetent at putting that out enough and widely enough that that's not, you know, just a commonly used phrase like it was in the 30s.
Yeah, well, we've had so much demonization of government that people are afraid to make that case. I mean, I guess the way I like to say it is we're in a situation right now where basically everyone is trying to save and cut spending. Everybody's trying to pay down debt, which doesn't work if we all try to do it at the same time. Because my spending is your income and your spending is my income, and if everybody cuts at the same time, you get a depression. This is when the government needs to do something different, right? The government needs to be out there, and it needs to be spending and employing people and providing that base so that the rest of us can, in fact, pay down our debts. That's hard to explain, partly because people tend to not think about how things add up. They say, well, I'm tightening my belt, the government should tighten its belt too. And unfortunately, people who should know better, including the president, have said things like that. It's also, you've got this, 40 years of demonization. The government is always the problem, never the solution. So trying to say, actually, right now the government is the solution takes some persuasion and takes some courage. And I have to say, we have not been seeing a whole lot of courage from very many people in this crisis, and a lot of Democrats seem to run at the first hint that they might be accused of being big government types.
Yeah. On the other hand, you've been outspoken, from talking about the confidence fairy to all the praising Keynes.
That's my contribution to the English language. I think this will stay. I talked about people who believe in the confidence fairy. They believe if you slash government spending and lay off hundreds of thousands of school teachers, everything will be fine because the confidence fairy will come in and rescue us. And guess what? She has failed to make an appearance.
Yeah, the first time I read that, you writing that, I laughed out loud. And after that, it's a serious, it's brilliant. That was a brilliant metaphor. We have been doing this for 30 years. 31 years since the Reagan presidency began, if my math is right. And started right out busting Pat Coe, who he had previously made a deal with. They supported him in the election. And then it went all downhill from there. He was just Thatcherism on steroids. This has been so completely discredited now, Reaganomics, after 30 years, or it's any rational perspective. Isn't it time to just come right out and say that this is not a legitimate economic theory? It never really was. It was voodoo economics, like George Herbert Walker Bush said, and it's just a cover-up for those who want to redistribute wealth to the very rich?
Yeah, it needs to be said. Some of us are trying to say it. It has turned out, I've been astonished and not happy to see the resilience of this voodoo economics despite its failure. You would have thought that this crisis, which is, according to their theory, could not have happened, would discredit it. But a friend of mine, the Australian economist John Quiggin, calls it's zombie economics. You keep on thinking you've killed it, but it keeps on shambling forwards. So we're looking for silver bullets or whatever it is to make it stop. But yeah, this has been the perfect demonstration that Keynes was right and Reagan was wrong. Well, and you couldn't get clearer than that. Yeah,
and another piece of this whole voodoo conspiracy theory, I guess, is that, or maybe not. Maybe you would agree with it. I'm curious your take on it. Is that the Fed played a role in this? That we never should have established a central bank? That we never should have gone off the gold standard? That the solution to all of our problems in the kind of Ron Paul world is just for the government to create coins made out of gold, and that's it.
Yeah, that's another one of those things that is just amazing that people would be believing that. Look at it this way. Part of, in a way, what's going on, when they created the euro, when they created a single currency for Europe without a single government, what they did was to create something that's quite a lot like a gold standard. Think of Europe as being the modern version of the gold standard, where it is these pieces of paper with bridges and doors on them that are like gold. It's just like, if you're the government of Portugal or the government of Greece, like a country on the gold standard, you can't print currency. It's not under your control. So what we're watching in Europe is basically the replay of the collapse of the gold standard, with all of the same disasters happening in Europe that happened to countries that tried to stay on gold in the 1930s.
So what would you say specifically to someone who is promoting the gold standard or calling for the abolition of the Fed, or maybe even states to produce their own money?
Wow. So I mean, I've tried. Actually, I've even debated Ron Paul, which turns out to be hopeless because you're just talking to a wall. But to a young person who's trying to understand,
Yes.
you need to tell them that this is not about. You think that the people who talk like this are on the side of the little guy and against the banks, but they're not. They're actually supporting a policy that rich people, that billionaires have always liked. The reason that gold standard, that gold bugism survives in this modern world is because it's a doctrine that has always been subsidized heavily by billionaires who like the idea that nobody can print money and nobody can inflate away any of their assets, even if a little bit of inflation is what it takes to rescue the nation from mass unemployment.
So it's a scam.
Of course, it's a scam. I mean, yes. I mean, it's you know, John Maynard Keynes again. He called the notion of gold in the economy a barbarous relic.
Yeah.
I mean, there's lots of problems with our country, but why should this metal, this not especially useful metal, be the gold standard of value? We have an economic problem. It needs to be managed. It needs to be managed through human intelligence, not by appealing to something that may have made sense back in the first century BC.
More with Nobel Prize winning economist Dr. Paul Krugman right after this break.
We got out of a technical recession in the middle of 2009. It doesn't seem very good out there, right? I mean, we've had some growth, some job creation, but not enough to stop a really disastrous situation. You know, about 4 million people have been out of work for more than a year. College students graduating and finding no jobs, or no jobs anyway that make any.
Thanks so much for joining us. It's great to see you here. First off, where are we at right now? Your book is called End This Depression Now. Is that where we are, a depression?
Yeah, I use the word pretty deliberately. A recession is when things are heading down. A depression is when things are down. And although, at least in the United States,
20 books, including several bestsellers, and over 200 papers on international trade, finance, currencies, and several other topics. He's a recipient of numerous awards, including the Nobel Prize in Economics, which he won in 2008. Currently, he's a professor of economics and current affairs at Princeton University, and you can read his work every day as a columnist on the pages of the New York Times. Dr. Krugman's new book is titled End This Depression Now. And with Europe in crisis and the United States economy still teetering on the edge, he's someone we should all be looking to for ways to get our economy back on track. Dr. Paul Krugman joins me now from our Los Angeles studio. Welcome.
Hi there.
Thanks. For tonight's Conversations with Great Minds, I'm joined by Nobel Prize winning economist Dr. Paul Krugman. Dr. Krugman received a Ph.D. from MIT and has taught at several schools, including Yale, MIT, and Stanford. He's written